What is inheritance? So I just wish to hear from you before I start. You can unmute yourself and say, or you can post it in chat. Just any idea about any idea that you have about inheritance.
Karthik, Shiva here.
Yes, you.
Inheritance is a part of the OOPS concepts which Java provides as a feature, uh, which we can use it as what to say that using the methods of other classes into the like inheriting those methods and functionalities into different classes.
Yes. That is one way of one application of inheritance, one uses of inheritance, right? Correct. You can use reuse methods also from one class into another class. You can reuse their variables, right? So to manage the what to reuse, what not to reuse, we have three different access modifiers, right? Public, private, and protected. There is something called default. We will leave that for now, but we will concentrate on these things. Default will come later, right? So public is something which is available across our project. Private is something which is only restricted to that class, and protected is something which is kind of the other class. If it is extending or inheriting the base class, then the methods or variables from the base class can be reused if it is declared protected or public, right? uh, if it is declared protected, only the class which is deriving it will be using those variables, not any other class. So that is the main use case of protected. So only that particular class which protected is declared. Maybe I'll just write the use cases. Public access across project. If you declare something as protected in the class, only class which is deriving class can access, right? And private, only the same class can access.
I think what you mean by deriving here.
Okay, deriving, we said, right, one class can use the methods of another class. How we are going to use that method class? The class which is using those methods is called derived class actually. Okay, there's a parent class or class which you write in Java, and it will contain some objects, initialization, variables, methods, right? So when I mean by derived class, it's like the class which is extending this parent class, and you going to use this particular methods and variables here, right? Which is got from this base class, and which is going to reuse the objects and methods. The class which is going to use these parent class methods are called derived class. Fine, right?
So you meant to say that the protected can be used with the extended classes only, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So there is okay. We are saying that can use the methods, reuse the methods available in one class into another class. But what is the use of doing that actually? So there are certain areas where the two classes functionalities might look same, but it is kind of little different in the second class, which the properties are derived. That is a derived class. For example, I have this class, parent class, which is any class has certain functionalities, right? We already saw with the previous examples. Um, let me quickly, yes. What is the purpose of this air ticket class? It is going to count the ticket uh, booked through the air reservation systems. And railway ticket class, it is going to do the same, but with the hell, what are going to count the tickets? It's going to count for the railway things, right? So that itself one question rose. I think Shiva, you only asked that question. So why can't we directly extend that class and use? So for those kind of scenarios, only inheritance is used. So instead of creating some static variables and creating an object here, right? We are creating a ticket object here, right? Instead of doing in those ways, why can't we extend the ticket and why can't we reuse those methods there? So that is also possible. So there are many use cases for this because ticket is a common word, right? Ticket can mean anything. It can be railway ticket or air ticket or bus ticket. So this particular air ticket, I can say, is an implementation of this ticket, right? Can I say that? It's kind of implementing something from the ticket. Can I say that? So even a ticket and air tickets are kind of similar but still different because ticket is generic and air ticket is a specific implementation of the ticketing system, right? So are we clear with this point? So when I have this parent class and I'm going to extend this, in Java we use the term extend to extend the capabilities of this child class, and I have derived class which we are going to call as child class or derived class, whatever is the same, child class. So we have two classes here. This child class is going to extend this parent class. So consider this as a whole entity, right? Even though it is two classes, this child class can reuse the methods here and provide different implementation to it. So what basically is happening is like it is kind of reusing all these methods in the child class in different way, right? Like we saw in ticketing and air ticketing, both are kind of same but still very different, right? So what happens is like child parent class will have some generic methods, which is kind of it is there in the parent class, so that the child classes or derived classes which is coming and extending this parent class will can provide certain meaning to those methods or can override it and can change the definitions of those methods. We'll see these examples in real time. So consider this entire thing as a single entity or single class. Just we are splitting the single class functionality or uses into two different classes so that the reusability is there and the project can be well defined in a well orderly manner, right? So that is the best use case of inheritance, to split the separation of concerns. What's separation of concerns? We might have some um, methods for certain use cases, certain functions. We might have some other methods in certain class which is almost similar, which can be used as additional methods or additional capabilities along with the methods available in the parent class. So we are just going to combine both the things to give the additional power and to combine those things in a single entity, right? That is so what inheritance also defined in Java, right? That is how. So it is what it says. It is just a mechanism to acquire all the properties and behaviors of parent object and reusing the child object. So what's the meaning of reuse? I can give a new definition. I can combine the parent methods, parent class methods, and child class methods together to form a new entity or to form a different purpose altogether in our project, right? So whatever given here, it makes sense, right, to create a new classes that are built upon existing class. So whenever I say child classes, we are extending the parents. It is built upon the existing classes so that it is considered as a single entity to give some particular functionalities or meaning to a given project. Base and parent class might have some methods. Child class might have some separate methods. Child class can reuse the parent class methods, and child class methods and parent class methods can combine and provide a different functionality to the user. That is also possible, right? So one of the main use cases is code reusability, right? And what is the second main use? There is something called method overriding, right? In previous classes we saw something called method overloading. Can anyone say what's method overloading? Can anyone say?
Uh, it's it's overloading the methods within which has the same with the same parameters and the uh, same method name, which
Yes.
is like
So
yeah,
my
which in
project
the
can
class you
contain
can.
yes, yes, yes. So what is method overloading? I have this reserved tickets method here, right? I'm just going to create one more method of same name. If I give same argument, let's see what happens. It's throwing me in some error, right? So duplicate method like that. So what I can do, I can just, so if I give different argument here, even though the method names are same, I have different arguments here. So now our Java will know, even though the method names are same, in the runtime I know what to call based upon the arguments passed. So this is called method overloading, right? We are overloading the existing method with a different method by passing different number of arguments or different type of arguments, right? But method overriding is somewhat different. What is overriding in general English term? Overriding is like we are giving a new meaning to something, right? We override the existing value and give it a new value. That is called overriding, right? We are going to completely give a new definition for that. That's called overriding. Same applies to Java here. I will see some example here. Before that, we'll complete this. So inheritance main use case is that only for method overriding. This is also called runtime polymorphism or dynamic polymorphism, because what method to call is dependent upon how the object is initialized, and it is done at the runtime. We'll see the examples. Okay. But before moving to the practical examples, we need to understand what inheritance are supported or not supported in Java. So these are the supported inheritance. So I can have one base class or parent class. I can have one single child which is extending the parent, right? So this is kind of possible in Java. I can have a hierarchical inheritance or multi-level inheritance. I can have a parent class. I can have one class which is extending this parent class. We call this child one. I can have one more class which is extending this child one called child two. So I can go and create n number of classes like this, right? And this is called hierarchical inheritance. I have one base class or parent class. There can be two child which is kind of extending the same parent class to give two different implementations of the same object, like we saw in this example. I have ticket, I have air ticket, I have railway ticket. uh, yes, we saw here, right? This air ticket extends ticket. Even this railway ticket, the extend keyword is kind of used to inheritance, how we inherit the parents, right? Similarly, I can use this railway ticket and extend this ticket also, ticket class also. That is also possible. Okay. So whatever we saw in the ticket example is the classic example of hierarchical inheritance. Have one base class, two child class, which is extending the same base class. But there are certain things that are not allowed in Java. Something like this multiple inheritance. I cannot have two base classes and there are going to be one single child which is going to extend to class A and as well as class B. That is not supported in Java. Why it is not supported? It is supported in C++ actually. That one particular problem occurred in C++. That is why we removed this capability in Java. We will see why it is not supported in the later. But we should understand that it is not supported in hybrid model also. Similarly, even in hybrid model, I have one base class, two child class. That is fine. Again, I have one child class called D, which is kind of extending two base classes, similar to this model, right? So again, this is not supported in Java. I cannot do something like this. I can do only something like this. One base class and two child class, not two base class and one child class. So are we clear until now? Okay. So we'll see with on practical example. Create a new package here. A new package. I'll just call it inheritance. We will close this. What I will do, I'll just create a class called employee, right? So you can see, right, while creating the class itself, it is saying I cannot have my classes private or protected. Class cannot be protected because we are not going to derive the entire class itself. We are going to inherit the objects and properties and methods of those classes. That's one thing we have to understand. So I'm just going to click on finish. What I'll do, I'll just create two variables here, right? Mm, for time being, I'm going to give that as public.
Karthik,
Yes.
just before you mentioned while creating the class, okay, we can't have the class as a protected or private, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, may I know the reason for that?
No. What is the use of having a protected class, right? If you declare a class as protected, what is a protected class then? Protected is something which you are going to give your child classes to use, right? That's called protected, right? I'm a parent class. I'm going to give some properties of me to the child class. What are those properties? Either it can be public property or protected property, right? If I declare class itself as protected, then it doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to give the entire class itself. So it is kind of overriding whatever inside a class. I may have some private member also like this. Private int a is equal to 5 or 6, something like this. So if I declare this as private, what is the meaning? I should not give this particular variable to any other class, even if there's one child class which is extending this employee. I should not give this value to this child class, right? But if you declare this as protected, what will happen? You are saying entire class is protected, and it is kind of giving the entire class members to its child class, right? Doesn't make sense. It's kind of overriding whatever the purpose we declared as private. So Java doesn't allow that. It's saying illegal modifier, right? So what's the use of declaring this as private if we declare entire class as protected? Doesn't make any sense, right? and you cannot give an entire class itself to another class, right? You can give only variables or member methods to another classes, not the entire class itself. That also doesn't make sense. I hope I was making some sense.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, just declare it as public. uh, what I'm going to say, I have this employee class. So I will have two variables here. One variable is of int, which I'm going to call employee ID. Okay, I'll just not give any value, and I'll just declare one more public, which is of type string, employee name. So what I will do, I will have one method here just to print this employee ID and name. I'm just going to sys out. Right. So I have this classical employee where I have two variables. One is of employee ID. One is employee name, and I have just one method to print these details. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create one more class uh, called, let's say, uh, in employee is a kind of generic term, right? But what is a specific? What can be a specific implementation of an employee? So in an organization, I can have a marketing person, I can have an engineering person, I can have a management person. So can engineering employee can be a specific implementation of an employee, right? Right. I've created one class called engineering employee. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to extend this employee class. Right. Now this employee and engineering employee, you can consider this as a single entity, right? Employee, I can have some methods, but engineering employee is specific implementation of this particular employee, right? Specific variant of this particular employee. So it makes sense to extend this employee class through a class called engineering employee. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have two variables here also. Let's say for time being, declare it as public string department. And let's say public int, let us give some value like okay, instead of department I can say role, right? Engineering employee role, and I can say public int years of experience. So now I have one method public void print int. I have one more method here also. I'm just going to do some sysout. So now we can create main method in either of the two classes, but for clarity's sake, I'm going to create a new method to test these two classes and create main method there. Just say test inheritance. Just initializing this particular object class with the main method itself. So before going to this particular inheritance concept, I have these two separate classes, right? Employee and engineering employee. What if I just wanted to print some, I mean, call this method, what will be general thing I have to do? Generally, whatever we saw until now, what will be the thing which I have to do? Let's say I want to call this employee object, this one here, print employee details here. What is the one thing that I have to do here?
We'll create the
Yeah, create an object, right?
object, right?
Employee e is equal to new employee, and I have to set those values. E dot employee ID is equal to 1. E dot employee name is equal to some random name. Let's give my name itself. So I'll just call this method now, print employee details. Try to run this. So it's printing, right? Printing employee details. So one question which I have, which I wanted to ask is like, I have this class called engineering employee, which extend this employee. Can I do similar thing to this class also? Whatever I did for this employee class, can I do similar thing for this engineering employee also? My goal is to call this method.
We can still create the object of it, right?
Yeah, so that is also possible, right? Engineering employee, let's say sorry, role, let's say testing. Years of experience, say 7, right? So I just I can go and print this method. Right. So if I run this, I will have two output. So I have this employee details and engineering employee details, right? So even though this engineering employee is kind of extending this employee class, I can still use this as a separate entity, consider this, treat this as a separate entity, and I can do something similar to this also. But if you would have noticed this engineering employee class, I'll just, if I use this object and try to call some variables or methods, trying to give some suggestions, right? It is also I can also access employee ID from here, and employee name from here. Say, so if you notice, this employee ID and employee name are not the properties of this engineering employee class. We have only roles and years of experience, but still if it is extending this employee class, extending means what? Extending the objects and properties into this child class. So that's the meaning of extending, right? So I can access directly this particular uh, I mean employee ID and employee name from the child class object itself. That is one main thing to note, right? So if I can go and call this particular method also, I can print this employee details also, right? Let's comment this out for time being. Let's try to run. So if you can see, right, whatever I'm doing here, I can set the values of base class from my child class itself. That's the whole point of extending a class, right? So I have some properties and methods of a base class. When I say reusing, I can use that in a child class object also. I can set the values from the child class object. I can use those variables or methods in the child class object also. That is the main purpose of inheritance, right? So without creating this employee object itself, I can directly creating a engineering employee object and set these values of employee uh, set these values of employee ID and employee name, which is available in the employee class instead of engineering employee. I can do this also. Until now, it is clear.
Is it possible to write like in this way to call print engineering employee details e dot print engineering employee?
That is reverse way is not possible
Okay.
because we are just extending this child class from the base class. We can reuse the base class methods into child class, not the child class methods into the base class. So if I uncomment this, I from the E I cannot go and access the child class variables, right? I have only employee ID, employee name. If I go print, I only print only one print method, which is belonging to this employee class, not the employee engineering class, engineering employee class. You got it right? So reverse is not possible. Sure. Fine, right? Hello.
Yeah, I got it.
So what typically happening here is like I have this engineering employee which is extending the capabilities or extending the employee class itself into this engineering employee. Employee doesn't extend the engineering employee. Engineering employee extends the employee. That's the reverse scenario. Right? So I can have one more class also similar to this, right? I can have one more class called marketing employee. I can, like this engineering employee, I can have this same role and years of experience. Doesn't matter, right? And here I'll have a method like public void print marketing employee details. I can just copy this and paste it there. Instead of engineering, I'll just say marketing. So I'll just so if I wanted to inherit what class can I inherit? I can inherit again the employee class, right? So if I want to inherit, I have to use this extends keyword, extends this employee. Okay. So now similar case, if I want to test this engineering thing, marketing employee, if I want to test, just have to create this object here, right? So I can access the base class objects here also. Employee ID, name, these are of type employee. You can see here, right? This is sort of type employee, and I can see the roles and years of experience, which are type marketing employee, not that engineering employee, right? So I can go and assign the value similarly. I can just say employee ID 100. Let's say Raj. Let's say he's a telemarketer. Let's say his years of experience is 10. So if I want to call that method, market dot print, right? Print marketing employee details. Same case. So this marketing employees role and years of experience are totally different from this engineering employee role and experience. So we are clear with that point, right? I can go here and create an engineering employee here. So even though it has same name, these are from the total different classes. This role and years of experience and this one. So these are two different separate entities. So are we clear with that point, right? Until now. You can respond in chat. Only 2% are there, so you can please do that for me.
Karthik, I have a doubt here. So in class test inheritance, if we create an object for test inheritance and can we can call the variables which are there in employee.
No, how we can do that? Test
What
in.
if we extends test class test inheritance extends employee and then we can call?
Then we can call.
Okay.
So can we try that?
Yeah.
You want to create an object for this test inheritance, right? I can just say inh dot. I can just access this employee ID and name because that is what available in this employee class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can access this method also. Print employee details. But this test inheritance class is just to test out this properties of this employee engineering and marketing employee. I just don't want to confuse by inherit. Maybe this name is confusing. I think test inheritance. Can we just rename to test class? Inherit of inheritance. Just going to test this, right? Test class. So I'm just testing this inheritance concepts of engineering and employee and marketing employee inside this test class, right? So these roles and years of experience are two different entities. One entity is belonging to this marketing employee class, another belongs to this engineering employee class. Are we good until this, Varsha? Or any
Yeah,
doubt until this? No, right?
yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So I'll just come back to this. So what if just what if instead of calling this employee ID and employee name separately to print out doesn't make any sense, right? I just can directly use employee ID and employee name here itself, right? Since we can use the base class objects inside this child class. So what if I can directly use this employee ID, employee name to print out in the child class itself instead of doing it here in the base class? That is also possible, right? So let's try to run this and test this program. Let's delete this. Just going to create an engineering employee object. So if I call this method print engineering employee details, let's try to run this and see what happens. So it's giving me, right, the employee details are, it's a tester 73 and Karthik name, everything we are getting here, right, from the engineering employee. 7 is years of experience, 3 is employee. Maybe I'll put a little space over here. So we're getting it, right? Getting the role, years of experience, ID, and name. So all we are getting by just calling this one method, right? So we can do like this also. Doesn't mean I have to only do like this. I can go and do something like this also. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll just so now what happens? I have this employee ID here also, right? Employee ID in the engineering employee also. I have this in employee also. What I was doing here is like in the test I just said setting this employee. Maybe I'll just try to access this employee ID again, right? So now what it is showing, it is showing only the employee ID available in the derived class, right? It's not showing the employee ID or, in the base class. This employee ID belongs to this engineering employee class, not the employee class. So if we try to run this, it is still running, but this 3 value is not coming from the employee class, it is coming from the engineering employee class. That is the only difference. Right. I just given as super. The super keyword, what it does, it if there's an ambiguity, something like this. When I just say employee ID here, there is some ambiguity, right? What employee ID I should take? Whether employee ID belong to this engineering employee class or this employee class, because this engineering employee extends this employee, I can reuse these variables here also. So when I try to run this program, it will always take the engineering employee class variable, because that is what is immediately available, immediately visible hierarchy, right? This is the first hierarchy because this employee ID present in this class. Second hierarchy only is coming from this parent class, second level of searching. So what Java is doing, Java is trying to find this employee ID first in the engineering employee class itself. It is able to find, and it is going to print that value only. We want to specifically print the super class value or super class. What I mean by super class is like parent class. I just have to give the keyword super here. So I haven't initialized any value here. Maybe if I have to initialize some default value like 100, we'll try to run this. Now it's coming 100, right, instead of 3. Even though we are explicitly setting the value of 3 to employee ID here, that value is not coming because we have given super dot employee ID. Super means it will take the parent class value. So what's the use of super keyword? Super keyword is used to access all the parent class variables, methods, or constructor. That's the use of super keyword. So now it's printing 100 instead of 3. So are we clear until this point?
Yeah.
Okay. So what if I have declared this employee name as public? What if I declare this as private suddenly? Now some errors are coming here. You can see here and here also some errors are coming, right? What error is throwing if I go and hover over this name? The error is the field employee name is not visible. So what is visibility? Visibility is something which we can what we can access or not access from the base class. So visibility of this particular employee name is now limited only to this employee class because we marked this as private. So it is not accessible to this particular engineering employee module. So we are able to see the error here as well as error here. If you try to access this employee name from the test, engineering employee object, it is still throwing the same error, right? It's not visible. So once you declare something as private, even though one class is extending this variable is not available inside the class which is extending, because every time we don't have to expose all the parent class objects to the child class, right? We have to restrict something, some sensitive information from that to access. So in those cases we use private. If I wanted to change the access, I just wanted to make it visible again instead of private instead of public, and can just give protected, right? So protected is also possible. Protected is kind of a specific keyword that is reserved to the extending classes. Protected is used elsewhere also in one more scenario also. We'll come to that thing later. So understand that protected main use case is to protect this particular object declared, so that only the derived class uses those objects. In this scenario, derived class is the engineering employee or child class is engineering employee. So that only can access this particular employee name. Right? If we try to run this again, Again, the run is successful.
So the difference between protected and public is that protected only the child classes can be used, and public any class can be any
yes,
class
yes,
can.
yes, yes. That is the major difference. What if I declare this employee ID as private? Again, I cannot do a super here, right? Because employee ID is only private to this that particular class. So I cannot use a super there, right? Asha, are we good until now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I can do a similar thing for marketing employee also, right? So I just wanted to emphasize on one thing. I have this parent class here, private, protected, and public. Uh, this method is public. What happens if I declare this role as private here? Will it have any impact? For time being, I will declare this as protected. Avoid those errors. So will it have any impact? It has an impact here, right? Can you see this? Even though this we are trying to access this role through the object created from the engineering employee itself. Now this engineering employee object is declared outside this class, right? Outside this engineering employee class, because this main method is present in a different class called test class, right? So it is not visible here, right? What if I directly cut this or just copy this and paste it here? Now it is not throwing any error, right? Because that role, even though it's private, they're able to access here because it is available in the same class. So are we getting the difference?
I have one more doubt. Here, if we have declared private, what is that? One second. Hold on. Yeah, private string role, right?
Mhm.
So if we cannot give private static here.
Yeah, I can give also. It's wrong. Right? But this private static variable is only restricted to this particular class, right? How you call a static variable? Something directly from the object name itself. For example, um, role only we changed it, right? Yes. So that role itself is not available, even though it's static, it's not available, right? Because this particular engineering employee is declared outside of this engineering employee. What if I declare this as public? Now this role is available, right? So even though it is static and we can directly change this value to different objects, declaring a static variable private doesn't make any sense because we cannot be accessed outside that class. What's the use of static? Static variables can be accessed from different objects and change its value so that the changed value is available for the remaining created objects, other objects trying to access it. So when we declare this as private, it's totally overruling that concept. So private static variables have only limited use cases where you have to change this value dynamically in the same class itself, depending upon what you wanted to do. Generally, public static makes sense. Is it clear, or you want some other explanations also, Varsha?
Yeah, I'm clear with it.
Okay. Let's remove this main method for time being. Okay, what if let's remove the static for now. What we said is like I cannot access this role in outside this class if I declare as private. We saw, right? What if I declare as protected? Now it's not throwing any error, right? I'll just show why in 1 second. Now it's coming error. So I just said right before sometime protected has one more use case also. That is this use case. Even though it is protected, on even though we say only child class can access those protected variables, I can still access that protected variable by creating an object which is in the same package itself. Right, this test class is available in the same package, so this protected is accessible inside this package level itself. Okay, maybe we'll see this detailed example tomorrow. I think it will be kind of an overkill. No, so understand that if it's a private, I will not be able to access. If it's a protected or public, I'll be able to access this particular role inside the same package. If it's public, it's across the project level. So if it's a protected, it's across the package level of access, right? There are many concepts of inheritance. Maybe we'll continue in the next class. So until now, it is clear, right? Whatever the concept of inheritance that we saw. Varsha,
Yeah, it's clear.
Shiva. Yeah. Dipta, I think you joined later. Maybe the recording will be available. You can see that later also. If anyone has any other question, you can ask. Otherwise, we can wrap up the session. Shiva, Deepta, Varsha, anyone has any other question?
No, Karthik, we are good for today. I think I'm good for today.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no more questions.
Okay, then I'm wrapping up the session. We'll continue this tomorrow. Thank you for joining.
Okay, Karthik, thank you.
We'll share this record.